Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. By now, we are on day 5 of all of our Facilitation Week activities, and it's so good to see more people coming in as the days go by. And it's just so nice to build more connections with each one of you over the past week. And I'm so glad that we have this session today, and I'm so glad that Vijji is here, and she is just a phenomenal woman that I've just recently crossed paths with. It would be 2 months now, and but she's just a phenomenal woman that I have met. And when we were planning for this session, I immediately told Daniel, I was like, you know what? There's this woman who I met in India, and she just did a fabulous session, and I think we have to bring that here. And so here she is. But let me do a formal introduction of Vijji. So Vijji does wear multiple hats. She is a coach, a facilitator, and a storyteller. She's worked for over 20 years in the corporate sector, as well as in the education sector, with several organizations in the areas of leadership development and organizational diagnostics. She is a trained process facilitator, and she facilitates personal growth labs for women leaders. She is also committed to creating spaces in the communities that allow for meaningful learning and explorations. And I think that's really what we're doing here and what we're going to be experiencing with her as well. And this session is well coined Connecting Through Stories, and that's the name that I got to experience as well. But it's so much more than just storytelling. It really is about building the connections between all of us. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Vijji, to take us on.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm really excited to be here. I think as a storyteller, the more circles I create through the stories, the more ripples go out into the world. And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this circle. I'm really excited about what might emerge through the conversations this evening for you all, and kind of afternoonish for me sitting here in Bangalore, India. Before I kind of dive into the plan for our session today, I'm just curious to know, when was the last time, sure Zoe, not a problem, but I'm hoping you'll be able to at least bring your voice in, and whenever you're comfortable, turn your video on as well. So my question to the group is, when was the last time somebody told you a story, you know, one of those once upon a time in a land far, far away kind of stories? The last time you heard a story like that? Yes, Putri. You can unmute and yeah.
I do that because I have 3 grandchildren right now, so storytelling.
So you are the one telling stories, or are they telling you stories? You have to unmute yourself.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes they will tell me what they have done. So their story should be something that, oh, I upset my mommy, or I play tricks on my daddy. This is what I do, and it's sort of thing. So I just listen.
Okay, nice, lovely. Others?
The last time I experienced storytelling was when I visited Laos, and I went to a performance, a so-called performance, where there was Laotian storytelling. So that was quite interesting.
Ah, lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That was about 2 years. That was 3 years ago.
Oh, this is in the pre-pandemic times.
Correct.
Ah,
yeah.
okay,
yeah.
lovely. Okay. Can we have a couple of other voices, please?
Probably a few days ago, from our MAFA president, Daniel. Daniel loves telling stories.
Ah.
So I'm sure
nice.
A lot of us mutual friends know him, and he's very good at telling stories. Brilliant storyteller.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, Anjali would be, I mean, I think every other day there are stories, but one really nice one that I experienced was maybe a couple of weeks back. It was an Odyssey dance performance where a historical story was told through dance. Yeah.
So thanks for bringing that in, Rupa. Sometimes stories are, most of us know the oral tradition of stories, but there are many art forms. A painting can tell a story, a photograph can tell a story. And of course, through dance and music, there are stories all around us. So we really, I often think of us as people being held in this web of stories. And strangely, I, as a child, don't remember anybody telling me a story. My first introduction to stories happened when I started reading them, and I started reading very early. So I got introduced to oral storytelling many years later, where when I set up a school, this was early 2004, when I set up a learning center for children, like an after-school program in Bangalore, India, which is where I live and work out of. And typically the last activity for the day around 5:30 p.m. would be to gather all these 4, 5, 6-year-olds and tell them stories, and of course, listen to their stories. And I would notice sometimes that as I was telling a story and a parent would possibly come a little early to pick up their children, they'd be respectfully standing by the door waiting for me to finish the story. And these would typically be folk tales or wonder tales and fairy tales. And I began to notice that the expression on the face of the 30-something adult standing by the door was no different than the expression of the 4-year-old sitting on my lap. And that's when I started to think, and I have a wonderful colleague and partner here in India. And the two of us started to talk about how we're often telling stories to children, but I think as adults also, we need to listen to stories. And that's how the organization that I lead was born. It's called By the River. And through By the River, we started telling stories to adult communities. So we started, initially we said, we do adult storytelling, and that gave a whole bunch of ideas to people about what to expect. So we had to kind of change that and say we tell stories to grown-ups, and it sounds really dry and drab, but none of today's session is going to be dry and drab. I love sharing stories. I love listening to stories, and I'm ready to dive in. If y'all are ready to dive into the world of stories with me, maybe shout out or show a gesture, anything for me to know that you are in this circle with me. Oh, Rupa, love the icon. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Alan. Awesome. So before some of you joined in, Barry showed us a beautiful place where he is with a campfire site. And typically that's ideally where we should all have been, sitting around a fire as we warmed up to stories. I am in my office in an indoor space. I obviously can't light a fire now. So for now, just this candle will have to do. So as I light this candle, I think my intention for our work today is that the stories that you share and the stories that you listen to, my wish is that it helps you connect to both the power and the magic, not just of the stories, but also the power and the magic that each one of us holds inside us. So that's my intention. And are you ready for the first story of the day? Yes. Awesome. So there are a bunch of very interesting names here that I see on the screen. And all of us would have a story around our name, right? I mean, it could either be how our name came to be, so maybe these are stories that we've heard passed down in our family. Maybe our grandparents or our parents or an uncle or aunt would have told you how your name came to be. Or it could just be a story around your name, maybe when you were in school, maybe when you were in at work, or maybe in the family, some story around your name. So what I'm going to invite you to do, and we're going to be putting you in breakout rooms, is to share the story of your name, either how your name came to be, or how any memory around your given name, and for example, if I were to go first and share the story of my name, you do see my name on the Zoom window. It says Vijji there, that's just my first name. And Vijji is actually my nickname, the name that my parents gave me, and it's a rather long Indian name, is Vijaya Lakshmi, where Vijaya stands for victory And Lakshmi is the name of the goddess of wealth that we worship in my country. And interestingly, the festival that's coming up now, Diwali, the Indian festival, that is to celebrate the abundance that goddess Lakshmi brings into our life. So my mother was, when she was expecting me, she had gone to be with her parents, and I was to be born in my maternal grandparents' house. By then, my mother already had a 2-year-old son, and she was really hoping and praying that her second born would be a girl. She was very, very keen to have a daughter. And then I arrived, and there was much celebration in the house. And I was born on a Friday, where there is a very big festival that is celebrated in the southern part of India. Again, it's a festival to worship goddess Lakshmi. I was also born, the date that I was born was the 15th of August. And that is the day that our country won, it's the Independence Day of India, where we took over from the British, and we gained our independence. Now, my grandfather's generation, they had all been part of the freedom struggle, and they had their own special association with it. So when my grandpa saw me, the story goes that he said, Lakshmi has come to our house, and we are going to call her Vijaya Lakshmi, where Vijaya is freedom to signify Independence Day, and Lakshmi is after the goddess. And for as long as I can remember, I absolutely and totally hated my name. It's a very, very common Indian name. I had to fill a lot of forms when I was in school and in college, and I ran out of those little boxes that you have to fill up the forms. I absolutely hated it. And nobody called me by that name. Everybody called me Vijji. My teachers, my friends, my family members. So when I turned 18, I went to my mom with this new confidence of this adult. And I said, Mom, I've decided I do not want my passport, my official documents to call me Vijaya Lakshmi. I want my official name to be Vijji. Now, my mother was a very strict woman. I rarely spoke in this tone for her, but I was like, come on, 18, I've got to, I've crossed the threshold. I've got to show what being 18 means. And I was standing there waiting for her to blast back at me for being disrespectful, for challenging my name, I don't know what. And my mom was reclining on this gray sofa in our living room. And much to my surprise, she just looked at me with the softest, kindest eyes. And she said, well, change the name if you want, if that's what you really, really want. But that is the name that my father gave to you. Now, I have no memories of my maternal grandpa. He passed on when I was just 1 year old. And all I knew about him was that he was the one person my mother loved the most in the entire world. And then I realized that what was a long common name for me, for my mother, was a memory of the most special relationship in her life. So my passport still calls me Vijaya Lakshmi, and my friends and colleagues still call me Vijji. So that is the story of my name. And I'm sure each one of you has a story about how your name came to be, a memory around your name. So Alan is going to help put you in breakout groups of 3. And Alan, if we can have the groups for about 12 minutes, so roughly 3 to 4 minutes per person. Enjoy sharing the story of your name, whatever memory pops up, and let's just see where that goes. All right. Any questions before we get into our breakout rooms? Good to go? Awesome. So, yes, Alan. Will you not be joining breakout rooms?
Alan, you're on mute. Do you want to join Andy and Shanti?
Oh, yeah, I will join Andy and Shanti.
I'll hop into a room too.
I can't, Kathy, I can't put you in a group, so you're gonna have to put your...
I'll go hop in.
All right, so I've got a timer here. So 12 minutes or a little bit more than that?
No, keep it for 12 minutes. And,
Okay.
and when you close the rooms, and how much time would people, what is the
Immediate,
countdown
I
time?
set immediate. The moment I click close, bang, they're straight in, straight back.
Oh, then maybe give it another minute and close.
Another minute?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Vijay, would you like to go into any rooms as well?
No, I'll kind of be here, let them do the stories and come back. Thanks, Kathy. Welcome back. It's nice to see some of the videos coming back on. Lovely to have faces back on the screen. Just a quick sharing. What was the experience like of sharing the story of your name? What came up for you, your feelings, what the experience was like? If anybody would like to, don't talk about the story per se, but just the experience of sharing the story.
Well, I didn't know there were so many stories behind my name until I started thinking through and creating the stories, which perhaps somebody listening may find interesting. I've taken it for granted, I guess. Yeah, so that was quite interesting.
Thanks, Barry.
It was nice. I mean, nice feeling. And in fact, after sharing, I realized that whether it's for myself or for other people, rarely do we share a story about our own name, how it came about. We share about all other things, you know, what we eat or where we're going for a holiday or whatever, but very rarely do we talk about our name.
And I'm just curious, Alan, why do you think, or what's the value in that particular story? What might people discover about you through that story that they may not otherwise know about you from some of the other stories or experiences you share? What's special about, for you, what's special about the story behind your name?
Well, I would say the name also represents a part of me. So people also get to know a part of me that they don't know. So in a way, I'm revealing and I'm opening up about who I am and what I'm about. And
Yeah.
oh, that's your name. Oh, so then people kind of have the kind of connection.
Thanks, Alan. Would anybody else like to share?
Yeah, Vijay, I like the way you asked us to talk about names, because we have been in this facilitation week, so we got to know each other. And I think important thing is that a trust element is there, and we could bear some of what, shall I say, private things about ourselves, like our names. And one thing I realized that by doing the introduction or sharing the names, we tend to understand why our parents name us the way we are today. There's a connection to history, there's a connection to events, there's a connection to the meaning of the name, and there's also connection to the different generations. Like you said, you had you didn't know your grandpa, but there is that connection. So in other words, understanding where we are or who we are now has that magical historical moment and connection.
Absolutely. And kind of building on both what Alan said and what you're sharing now, Putri, is that when I reveal all of that to even a stranger or maybe even a friend with whom perhaps this has not come up, there is a certain tenderness, there is a certain intimacy in that moment that allows for trust to deepen in the relationship. So I'm going to ask my next question in terms of what was it like to listen to, each one of you got a chance to listen to 2 other name stories in your little groups in the breakout room. What was that experience like to listen to somebody's? And like you said, this is, you've been in and out of sessions with each other. There is some familiarity in the group, but to know people through their name story, what was that like? Shanti, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So it gave me an opportunity to realize that some of us have similar experience in terms of how we came about our name, because after listening to your story, I realized my story is the same. My name was given by my grandfather. So I didn't have a choice. So my name was spelled as S-A-N-T-H-I, which I thought, oh my God, I didn't like the sound of Sandy. So I grew up changing my spelling. All my friends who are here, they know that I've only used the spelling S-H-A-N-T-I, which is not my actual spelling. I've never revealed that to a lot of people. Only my official for booking tickets, or for some reasons I put my actual name. Otherwise it's all because I like the sound of Shanti better than Sandy, right? So, given to me by my grandfather. So it's nice to know that some of us have got a common experience of how we got our name. And I also had the opportunity to realize people like Alan, he knew his meaning, he knew how he got his name. And then Andy, on the other hand, didn't know, the meaning of his name, not in the as depth, as deeply as how Alan knew his. So this is where, is some realization that some of us take things for granted. That's my name, and never went further.
Yeah.
That's what I realized just now. Yeah.
Thanks, Shanti. One more voice, maybe. The experience of listening to a name story, how was that like?
Shall I go?
Yeah, Rupa?
So yeah, for me, it was Anderson. We're just the 2 of us. So we had a bit of time, but I think that experience of talking about a personal thing like your name and the story behind it, for me, the curiosity was there to know this person a little bit more. And it kind of breaks down that kind of the barrier that you might have when you first meet someone unknown. Actually, that's like, I'm quite an introvert. So when I go to functions and all, this is one of my questions, like, your name sounds so interesting. Tell me more. Chances are I forgot their name. So I'm just trying to get them to say it again. But and I find it's a nice way to bond with people. It creates a warmer connection than where do you live or that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, thank you, Rupa. I think the first time I did this, absolutely, Alan, it is a very cool conversation starter. And I think the first time I did this exercise, it made me realize that stories are everywhere. And very often when people say, tell me about an experience of your life, we tend to go into these life-defining, life-changing moments. And of course, those are the big significant stories. But sometimes even in how my name came to be, or that I don't know what my name means, but this is how I connect with it today as an adult. All of that can make for very interesting stories. So stories are everywhere. And I do know this. I've been very intentionally doing storytelling work with adult audiences for about close to 8 years now. All of us are natural storytellers. It's a very fundamental way in which we communicate as adults with each other. And of course, there is a very humane, very feel-good part of it, but there is also an entire neuroscience that supports why storytelling is a very, very useful, important tool when it comes to impactful communication, when it comes to facilitation, when you want to create impact with what you are taking your participants through in your role as facilitators. One of the interesting studies shows that when I am telling you a story, there are different parts of my brain that light up, right? Because there are different memory receptors in the brain, different parts light up. And you as an audience, as you're listening to the story, I'm just going to ask you a question. How many of you imagined an elderly woman, when I was sharing the story of my name, how many of you actually imagined an elderly woman lying down on a gray color sofa, listening to her daughter declare that she's going to change her name? Yeah, so some of you had that image that popped up. Now, none of you know what my mother looks like, but you kind of everybody knows how to imagine a middle-aged woman from India, possibly. And what happens is when you're listening to the story, you're actually creating the scenes in your inside of you. You're seeing the story with me, even though you're hearing the story from the teller, and your brain mirrors my brain. So that's the whole mirroring bit, and that's how we get connected. Now, when the story is happening from one to many, there is this bit called, between the teller and the listener, there is the process called the neural coupling that happens. And when the story is one to many, all the listeners, their brains are mirroring each other because they are all connected to the anchor of a single story. So now imagine in your role as a facilitator, when you are wanting to pass a message and you're doing it through a story, it's like everybody has gotten transported into the same bubble of insight, the same bubble of exploration. That's one part of what makes stories effective. The other bit that was very interesting for me, and there is a lot of literature out there that talks about it, is brain scans again show that when a person is listening to a story well told, there are 3 hormones that you detect in great numbers, great amounts. One is cortisol, oxytocin, and dopamine. Any guesses what cortisol does to us? When do we secrete cortisol?
Stress.
It's the stress hormone, right? So typically in a lot of stories, you would see whether you're watching a movie or you're listening to a story, the protagonist is going through life, everyday life, and then there is a challenge or some trouble that the protagonist runs into, and you relate to the protagonist. So when you see the protagonist going through some difficulty, you start to experience the stress of that person, and that's where cortisol comes in. And cortisol helps you be very attentive because you are alert to danger, you're alert to challenge. Oxytocin is, like many of you would know, it is the empathy hormone. And that is what allows for pro-social behaviors. It allows us to empathize with the person about whom the story is. So here is this character, I relate to that character, I'm empathizing with the character. As I see the character go through the stress, cortisol is increasing, I am very alert to what's happening. And then when the protagonist has their happily ever after, they go through the challenge and something happens and they are saved or they meet their loved one or whatever, dopamine is what gets released. And what does dopamine help us with? Any guesses?
Happiness.
Happiness.
Happiness, or the feel-good hormone, right? And when with that dopamine, there's an instant sense of aha that you experience in yourself. And it is this combination of cortisol and dopamine that allows for a certain stickiness of the story that has just been told. Now, you've listened to 2 other name stories in your breakout rooms. You may forget a lot of other conversations that would have happened in this facilitation week. But even when you meet this person after 1 year or 2 years, you will remember something about their name story. If you and I meet, you will know how I gave up my adult ambition for the love of my mom. And that's something you will always remember about me. Yeah. So that's really the power of stories. Any responses, any questions before we kind of slightly shift gears and look at another category of stories? Yes, Putri, there is a structure to tell. So there is a little bit of the art of storytelling, but there's also a craft. And I have factored for about 15-20 minutes of Q&A towards the end, and we will pick up that question a little later. So if it's okay with you, I'll just park it for now. Yeah. Any other responses to the conversation so far?
I definitely agree that storytelling is a powerful emotional connect, I would say, pathway or tool. As you said, even a year down the road, probably I'll still remember the story of how you wanted to change, and so it's something that really connects us and emotionally bonds us to something.
Yeah. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing this workshop, Shanti, with a group of people in Bombay, that's another city in India. And one of the participants, so this was a longer workshop. So typically when I work with personal stories, I do a week-long workshop. And so the participants came back on day 2, and one of the participants spoke about how she realized that she has never asked her mom, what is the story of her mother's name? And that evening, they ended up having that conversation where she asked her mom, how did your name come to be? I know how my name came to be, but how did your name come to be? And she later on reported the next day, and there wasn't a single dry eye in the group about how she saw her mother in a very, very different light when she heard the story of her name. So, here is somebody who you've known all your life, but when you get to, listen to the story of their name, something happens, some magic happens there as well.
Yeah.
So one of the asks that Kathy made of me when we were planning this session was to give you a taste of also how traditional stories or folk tales work. One of the things that I'm very alive to, and I again it came very alive to me, Shanti, when you were speaking about your fatigue at the end of the day. I find myself at a place where post the pandemic, at least in India, we're coming back into doing more in-person sessions. And I've realized that somewhere I have forgotten what it has meant to be in a room full of people. Rupa, like you, I identify totally as an introvert. So also managing my energy from Zoom to in-person sessions and all of that. And I think all of us are going through this very interesting phase in our lives where we've gone through one of the most incredibly difficult, challenging, painful incidents where the entire globe went through it at the same time. I think that was what made it unusual. Every single person in every single country was impacted by it, and there was a shared experience of loss and grief and suffering. And we've emerged on the other side where, while it may seem like we're going back to how it used to be, we all know that it's not really. We're never going to go back to how it used to be before 2020. I know in our work as facilitators, very often we are creating psychologically safe spaces for our participants to perhaps do some explorations that are difficult in themselves. And I think one of the most challenging explorations is how do we deal with ambiguity? How do we navigate some of the complexities in this absolutely volatile, unpredictable times that we live in? So what I've planned for the rest of our conversation together today in this story circle is to share with you a folk tale, a traditional tale, which has to do, I mean, enter the story wherever you are. For me, the story is a little bit about how do you navigate the ambiguity. For somebody else, something else might get revealed by the story, so I don't want to give it a title. So are you now ready to listen to a traditional tale? Have you warmed up enough to experience that? Alan, I'm going to request you if you could spotlight my video just for the next 10 minutes while I'm telling the story. And I'm going to shift to, once it do that, I'm going to go back to the gallery view so that I can see all of you all. Awesome. All right, so this particular story comes from the White Mountain Apache tribe. The version that I'm going to share with you today comes from the storyteller, and he really works a lot with mythology. This amazing professional storyteller called Michael Mead. You will see him work and play a lot with traditional stories and folk tales. And in this story, the old people of the White Mountain Apache tribe, they speak of a cave, an ancient cave that is tucked away deep in the mountains. And they say that in that cave, you will find all the secrets of the wonders and the wisdom of this world. It's not too far, they tell you. Maybe you just go up the mountain and turn a bend and explore somehow you will find the cave. Not too far, they say, and yet nobody has yet discovered that cave. And this is despite all the highways and the bylanes and every single inch of the earth being translated into maps. Somehow the cave continues to remain hidden. That's too bad, they say. For in that cave is all the wisdom you would need to make sense of the world that we live in today. For in that cave, there is an old, old woman. And the old woman sits by the entrance of the cave where the light enters in and the shadows play. And she is weaving an exquisite cloak. She knows it is going to be the most beautiful garment that this world has ever seen. It has beautiful patterns and vibrant colors, and she has been working on it for a long, long time. And she's finally come to the part that she only has to put the fringe on the cloak. And she likes the idea of something pokey also adding to the beauty. So she has collected all these porcupine quills, and she bites onto those quills to flatten them and then weave them into those threads to have this beautiful fringe. And she can't wait to finish her work so that she can show this beautiful, exquisite cloak, this garment, to the whole world. She has a different sense of time, and she has a deep, deep vision. And the world would surely learn so much from her vision. Occasionally, she has to stop her weaving and attend to one more equally important task. For in her cave, all the way behind, there is a fire, a bright fire burning, older than her, older than time. It's perhaps the oldest thing that has existed in this world. And on top of that fire, there is a huge pot. And in that pot boils an ancient stew. And the stew has all the seeds and the grains that bring plants and life onto this earth. And the old woman has to go and stir this elemental soup. But if she doesn't stir it in time, the fire would scorch all the ingredients. And then there is no telling what chaos would descend onto earth. So she divides her time between the weaving and the stirring of the soup. Somehow she senses just the right time that she needs to attend to the soup. And then she puts her weaving down on the ground of the cave. And she slowly makes her way to the back to stir this soup. And because she's old and because of this long passage of time, it takes her a while to reach all the way to the back of the cave and stir the soup. So in a way, you could say that this old woman is responsible for weaving things together and stirring things up, and both need to be done. Now, when this woman is at the back of the cave stirring this elemental soup, there is a black dog that lies asleep, seemingly asleep, just at the entrance of the cave. The dog watches her every moment as she limps across right to the back of the cave. And the moment her back is turned and she's focused on this stew that she needs to stir, the dog slowly walks to this exquisite garment that is now lying on the floor. And then very, very quietly, it tugs at a loose thread and pulls and pulls and pulls. And because one thread is woven into another as it makes these beautiful patterns, soon all the patterns start to come undone. And there is just a heap, a mess of threads on the floor. And that is the mess that the old woman discovers when she makes her way back to the front of the cave to resume her weaving. This beautiful cloak that she had been working on for a long, long time is completely undone. The beautiful patterns, the exquisite embroidery, all now just a chaotic mess on the floor of the cave. She notices the dog, but she pays no attention to it. And she just sits there quietly, just looking at this mess on the ground. And then slowly, her old hands pick up one thread and then another. And then she starts weaving them again. And soon new patterns begin to emerge in her mind's eyes. And those patterns, her old wise hands knowingly start weaving. The old cloak is now completely forgotten. And with a smile on her lips, the old woman now starts making another exquisite cloak, a beautiful garment, and she's sure it's going to be the most beautiful garment that the world has ever seen. And this is where the story rests today. So as you allow the story to settle in you, maybe you could put it in the chat window, or you could even talk about it. Any particular moment in the story or an image from the story that particularly stays with you at this point of time. The entrance of the cave, yeah, where the light and the shadows play. Thanks, Alan. The old woman having to redo her work. Alan, you can remove the spotlight if it's still on. Yeah. Something that brings in beauty as well, Krista. Kathy, the passage towards the pot with the glimmering fire.
I guess for me, it's the imagination of the emotions that old lady went through when she realized that her original creation was basically undone. And then the realization also at the end of having created something even more exquisite. So the emotion aspect of it was probably what I felt. Yeah.
The smile of you, the weaving and the stirring. Yeah. So like I said, each one of us, oh, Leonard. well, yeah, I sense your irritation and your anger, but the dog is also what, in his own destructive way, adds to the magic being recreated. Yeah. So for me, I know this from doing stories with groups, that each one of us enters the story based on perhaps what is very alive for us in our life. Maybe some of you are right now looking at maybe a time when something that you were working on had to be completely, it came undone and you had to start all over again. Maybe some of you are working on even trying to imagine, what is my purpose in life? What is the work that I want to put out that would help people make meaning in this chaotic world? Maybe some of you need the dog energy where you need to destroy something in your life that's perhaps no longer relevant or no longer making sense to you. Perhaps some of you may need to, you might be feeling the call of something ancient, like that soup that needs to be attended to for you to nourish yourself. Whatever is the connection that you're making, you will go into your breakout rooms again. And my invitation this time is to share a story about the connection that you're making with this and why does it seem relevant to you right now. So for example, if I look at this story, it's been, so I work in India with an incredible woman, Madhu. She and I run By the River together. And we've been friends for more than a decade. We've been work partners for the last 7 years now. And we have this amazing chemistry, trust, and we're both in our own right very good facilitators. And when we come together, we do amazing stuff. And right now we are at that stage where, because of her personal situation, Madhu is very soon going to be moving from India to the United States. And we are still kind of navigating that. So somewhere I am at that place where I know the dog's going to come in and he's going to undo this beautiful cloak that both of us have woven together. I know that's going to happen. I know a new pattern will emerge, but right now, I feel like I'm going to lose a limb. That's the piece. Part of me is really excited for the adventure that she's going to go on and what it might mean for our partnership. But part of me is just, I sometimes touch that grief and I'm like, okay, you're not going to think about it, dig your heels in and just do what you need to do. So keep weaving, keep stirring, do whatever. So I think that's where I am in my life right now. So talk about maybe, Alan, if we can have and are we shuffling people now? Are people going to meet? And maybe sorry, Alan, I said 3 people, but let's do this in pairs, if that's going to be okay. Yeah, so maybe just redo the room. So you will find yourself with one more person. And let's give it about 4 minutes each. So keep the entire breakout room for 10 minutes, Alan, and then we'll come back into the main session. So just an experience from your life that you connect to the story, a particular moment in the story, a particular character in the story, and what that might mean for you.
Give me a moment while I move.
Sorry about that, Alan.
No worries. Same amount of time?
Kathy, I'm going to 10 minutes, Alan. Kathy, I just saw your question on chat. It's very dark at the back of the cave and she's an old woman, so she possibly needs the daylight to do her weaving, but thank you for that question. Sometimes we are not where we need to be. Yeah. All right, Alan, ready? Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. I can't see the breakout rooms at all.
Shanti, we're back in the main room. We were just halfway through. I mean,
Oh dear.
we were going through another level.
Okay. All right. So, maybe just a quick sharing on what this experience was like.
It felt like the point in the story reflected on where I am in life right now, and likewise for who I was buddied up with, who was Carmen. It reflects, you know, where we are in a particular point in life. Yeah.
I think for me, it was also like the words spoken and then the words that it triggered inside, or the meanings that it triggered inside for me, was one thing to see. So I think the statement that we spoke about was weaving things together and stirring things up, and that meant something inside. So that was one layer, and I think both of us, Shanti and myself, had very similar, you know, aspects to where we are and what's the place that we're in. And I think the second layer that we got to really look at was the resilience of this old woman, and to also acknowledge that in ourselves, and to see ourselves in that as well. And while, you know, it might feel tiring and, you know, rediscovering and redefining and doing all of these things, but then the resilience that is with joy, not with tiredness, the resilience with love, and not with, you know, oh, I have to go and do this all over again. So we also got to acknowledge that and see that in each other.
Lovely. Both very important things to stay anchored in as we navigate these times. Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Shanti, for bringing that in. Maybe one more voice and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, maybe I can share. I had a session with Barry, and you know, I walked away. Wow, and we were talking, and I suppose the element of a great story has got so many facets, and it touches you at different parts, right? And but I think, you know, as he was sharing his take out on this, he was sharing a phrase to me, and they say sometimes you've got to destroy to create something new, right, Barry? And I thought that was so profound, you know, and I thought, wow, yeah. Because I was feeling a bit irritated with the dog, you know, destroying everything. But he, you know, he came around and said, hey, you know, sometimes you got to destroy to create, right? So and that's a good, I think a great story serves as a great bed of different things that can come out of it.
Yeah. So very often, Leonard, we speak about, so Madhu and I have this ritual where 2 days in a month, typically on a Monday, we get together and exchange traditional stories. And very often we ask the other person, what story medicine do you want for yourself today? You know, and then kind of, so there is so much of healing in stories, and especially we look at folk tales from many different cultures across the world. And it's interesting how the framework stays the same. The details change in terms of the names of the character or whatever, but there's a story I've heard or I've read as a child in India that I see in a book of African folk tales or in a book of Native American folk tales, and, you know, all of that. So it's really fascinating for me how some of these have just kind of withstood the test of time and just continue to be, you know, shared and passed on in many different cultures. Yeah. I see a comment with that, and Rupa says, yeah, destroy in order to create. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So thank you for trusting the process. Thank you for trusting the work. Open for questions, and I'm going to begin with the question, Putri, that you asked a little while ago. Intuitively, we all know the structure of a story, right? All good stories start with once upon a time in a land far, far away.
The beginning.
Yeah, the beginning, right? The very beginning. And then you have something that's so, if you look at any story, and the best way to analyze this are film plots, everything is going on in a particular schedule, and then there is a break into that routine. And that is what creates the emotional intensity in the story. And then the heart of the story is what the protagonist has to do to overcome the challenge, and then there is a happily ever after. So a status quo, life as usual, break in that routine, working through the challenge, and then the new status quo. Now that's the typical, and I'm very aware that I am packing in 3 minutes what I typically do over a week. But just to kind of put it out there, folk tales have a beginning, a middle, and an end. A slight difference between folk tales and personal stories is that the ending of the story is not where the incident ends, but you can make your personal sharing very, very impactful when you end it with, the reason I'm telling you the story today is. So you talk about the beginning, you talk about the incident, and then you end the story with, why did I choose to share this with you today? What is the gift of the story or the reflection of the story? Because you would have noticed that each one of us enters a story at different points based on what's happening in our lives. Now, when I'm using this as a facilitator, the divergence is great, but I also need for a convergence to happen. I need people to arrive. They can take their own maps, they can wander around Storyland, but we want them to finally reach the same destination, which could have to do with a sub-learning in the larger module that I'm doing. When you share the ending as a gift or a reflection, you allow for people to then converge into a common place where then they can explore and you can take the learning further. So that is like really, really in a capsule, but that's really what a structure of a story is, Putri. Yeah? Any other questions? I know we have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes. Any other questions?
Vijji, I have a question. I really like how you said what is the medicine you need today, and therefore then you have this whole archive of stories and then you prescribe or you tell accordingly, right?
Yeah.
So if I wanted to build something like that around, say, leadership competencies like integrity, teamwork, how would I go about setting up and collecting 3-minute or 5-minute stories so that I can tell the story and then land it on the medicine, so to speak? Is there any resources or guides you can?
Oh, there are plenty of resources. So especially in the learning context, Rupa, and these are very easily accessible online. You have these Zen story collections. Then you have Mullah Nasruddin. I mean, that's Hodja Nasruddin Mullah. You know, typically these jester tales, and every culture has its own jester. So I know the jester in the Indian context, in the Native American context, it's typically an animal spirit. So you have all these. So Zen stories work well. You have fables, short stories, and all of that. What I have found, but sometimes, Rupa, to kind of get a good folk tale can be quite challenging. Like the amount we search, and because the story has to come to me at the right moment in my life for me to see the wisdom or the value of that story. Sometimes it's really nice to dig into your own personal history. So for example, if you want to talk about team collaboration, to talk about a personal story and then open it up for people to share about their personal stories of when they collaborated well, and also when they failed to collaborate and what did they learn as a result of it. So it could be a combination of both success and failure stories, but I find Zen stories to be very, very powerful for some of these, or you could say wisdom tales and whatever, and you'll find hundreds of stories on the internet.
Okay.
There is a channel that Madhu and I, it's kind of gone a little dormant, but there are about 35 stories where we take a little story which is under 2 minutes and then we leave a reflection question. So I'll send that link to you, Kathy, and if you could just pass that down, you'll find some good teaching stories there, because, you know, it's often our work is facilitation. So then we've picked up stories that you might find useful there. So that could be another source for sure.
Thanks, Vijji.
Any other questions?
I guess the storytelling also, if you really want, you know, to drive home message, you should also include aspects of it which will raise the cortisol and the dopamine generation also, to ensure that it sticks, right?
Yeah. See more, Barry, when you say generational, what do you mean by that? If you could just speak a little bit more to that.
Well, I mean, if you tell a story and it has, you know, a dramatic aspect of it, or, you know, moments, you know, like the dog, beginning to draw the thread, and then the old woman, discovering the situation, etc. So your emotions are brought up and down, and you actually go through this whole thing. And I guess that kind of that picture of it also then sticks in your mind, and you remember that also.
Absolutely.
So in storytelling, if you are interested in ensuring that the audience goes away with something that they will remember, so you perhaps dramatize it a little more to enhance that, memory.
Yeah. So very often, sometimes people wonder whether storytelling is a performance art, and whether you have to be performative. Now, to me, the minute you start becoming performative, you move a little bit away from storytelling into theater. And there's no judgment of that. That's also a style. And I have many good storytellers in India who I have seen who are a lot more dramatic in their storytelling than what I'm comfortable with. To me, sometimes just a very simple thing like a pause for a couple of more seconds than necessary, 2 beats, just a pause, or just an emphasis sometimes can be. So my style is to keep it really, really simple and allow the imagination of the listeners to kind of take over rather than me bringing in a theatrical thing. But I also know storytellers who bring in music and rhythm and create a more performative way of telling stories. And that also is absolutely impactful. Yeah. But I think essentially what I'm trying to say is that perhaps this evening, Barry, when you're sitting around the fire pit and there's a fire burning there, you are going to discover that if you open up sharing stories, many people will start, oh, I can see he's walking there to make all of us jealous right now. So you could just sit there and start telling stories, and that's all you need. You need a fire and you need one more person to listen to. Look, the fire's starting up. Yeah, so that's all that you need for a good story. Thanks for that, Barry. Thank you. Any other questions? Andy, I'm wondering what your smile is about. Is there something you wish to share?
No, I just love I'm still loving that woman, the wise woman. He's deeply contented, he's so wise, and he don't label anything, and life goes on. Yeah, he's embracing life to the fullest. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Something
That's
that I aspire to. Yeah, despite all the nonsense going on. Oh boy. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you for sharing that. Any responses? Maybe you don't have questions, but any responses to what these conversations was like? Where are you at the end? We're almost at the end of our session. We have 3 minutes to go. Okay, yeah, maybe a one-word checkout on how you're feeling at this moment, having listened to stories and shared stories, 1 or 2 words about what you're feeling right now. It'd be great to have everybody's voice come in either on chat, or you could just unmute yourself and do that. Say a word.
I would like to share, just to share my personal experience when it comes to storytelling, that it really works. It is so impactful, and it is something that it's up to us where we want to use it and how you want to use it. Because I used to do sales in the earlier part of my career, and I've used it in closing sales so successfully. Right? A bit of drama, yes, but authentic stories with a bit of pause, as you said, the pause will be there, and the tone. I play with it a lot, and somehow it helps in getting people to relate to the point that I'm making. So the point I wanted to make is it's a powerful tool, and
it is.
And it's so adaptive to the context that we want to use it. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, so Shanti, when we started doing this work 7 years ago, a lot of the invitations we were getting from organizations in India were from sales teams. But in the last 5 years, many organizations worldwide are recognizing storytelling to be a absolutely critical leadership skill. It's no longer restricted to the marketing or the sales function, but if I have to be impactful, kind of evoke trust in my team, storytelling becomes a very, very key leadership skill for my own presence. And of course, as facilitators, we're forever leading people into, so thanks for sharing that. All right, one word checkout about how today's experience has been, how the story circle has been for you.
Hopeful.
Thank you, Alan.
Go ahead, Alan. Alan, go ahead.
He said powerful.
Okay. Everybody has a story to tell. It needs to be told and shared. Both teller and listener needs to know and appreciate the two perspectives. The world will be a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that.
Well said.
Yeah. Vijji,
Enlightening, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Barry. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying an enlightening session, Vijji.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barry.
I love what you share, Vijay. Storytelling is not about performing art.
Yeah.
The simplicity of stories that empowers. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Can I also share something? Earlier on, Vijay, you asked, when was the last time we heard somebody tell a story? And I also take part in a weekly help line, and people call in, and oftentimes they actually tell their story on to me. And I was just reflecting and realized that, actually all of us are good storytellers. It's just us, being able to, get in the opportunity, having the opportunity to tell the story. Because everybody that calls in when they need help, they will tell their story.
Absolutely.
And, they're not trained. They just want to share something so that, they can get help with. And yeah.
Thanks, Barry.
Maybe just an afterthought, right? We are now going in, the polling dates have just been announced, so we're going to have our general election. And what really dawned on me was the last 2 weeks, and I think in the weeks to come, you will hear a lot more stories coming from politicians. They are fantastic storytellers. I'm sure all of us has our chat groups being flooded with all kinds of stories, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. This is storytelling season.
Yeah. No, and also it's I know you meant it in a lighter way, Leonard, but to me it's also what are the stories that we need to spread and what are the stories that we need to really hold back and not spread. I think that becomes a very important responsibility as a listener of some of those stories as well. Yeah. All right. Any final words to be spoken, or are we ready to?
I know Krista's been unmuted for a while. Krista, would you like to?
Krista, anything you'd like to share?
I just wanted to say that it's a very magical session because I got to know, well, the origin of some people's names, as well as some interesting stories from Rupa, which, we didn't get to finish, but I hope we'll get to it. But just now, when you first started, you said about when's the last time you heard a story? Actually, it was last night. Not because I heard the story, it was because I was trying to binge watch Netflix. Trying to chase this series before it gets taken off. So I was watching this series called The Good Doctor, about an autistic doctor. So I wanted to get as much of that before they took it off.
Yeah. So films, Netflix, all this content has some great stories, but there's something also more magical when you're listening to a story and you're imagining what the character looks like. You're imagining the cave, you're imagining the fire. So I think that's that added bit of the oral tradition that I hope we continue to preserve. And yeah, the screens, anyway, the screens are taking over our lives, but I just hope a little bit of the storytelling kind of stays, the oral tradition stays.
I think I was just going to say that it's been so confidence building, I think, going through that session the first time and again, and to see and to appreciate the stories that I do tell. I think for a long time, there's always a fear, like, am I saying it the right way? Am I, are people interested in the stories that I have to say? But I think just taking away the fear and like, it's the right way of doing things. And it's just so accessible and it's so easy. It's so human to tell stories. And that's the part that sticks with me.
Absolutely. Like Andy said, it's in the simplicity of the story, of the whole process. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to invite all of you to kind of lean in and blow off the candle with me as we bring our storytelling circle to an end. So count of 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everybody, and happy storytelling.
Thank you, Vijji.
Thank you, Vijji.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
And
Great.
happy
Thank you.
Deepavali,
Thank
Vijji,
you.
and everyone.
Bye.
else.
Yeah.
Happy Diwali.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Happy
Bye-bye.
Diwali. Bye.
Bye.
Sure, man.